So is there a better way to find your soulmate or your twin flame than what people have been telling you up to this point? Yes. Yes, there is, coming up right after this. Good afternoon. This is Lucky Lynx. I'm kind of excited about this video. I think this has been really fun to look at what I'm about to share with you and what I'm about to show with you. Now, I have put videos out in the past about this whole idea of twin flame and soulmate, and most of you who've been following my channel know that I have a pretty strong opinion about the whole thing, because I think the way that it's being taught to people right now by a lot of the gurus out there and a lot of the bestsellers, and the whole idea of this twin flame thing is that you got to suffer and you got to keep going back to someone and suffer, and it's your lot to suffer, and you came here with a soul contract and you guys are going to beat each other up until you both end up in hell, and then you can find out that the universe is only love, which never made sense to me. And I'm going to tell you something that I've never really shared on this channel from personal experience. When I was young, and I think it was about 20 or 21, I was involved in a relationship, and it was just the worst thing in the world for me. I mean, it was just everything was wrong with it. And it just kept going on and on and on, and there was a lot of is you is or is you ain't my baby, and there was a lot of pain and a lot of heartache and a lot of stuff that could have been avoided. And I remember in the middle of this relationship, I was driving to see this person, and I remember thinking at this moment, and I can still remember, it was the middle of the night, it was dark. I can remember what was on the radio. I can remember how the air smelled when it was coming in the window, and I was driving, and I thought, I have done this before, and I have done this with this person before. And it was really at that moment that I started looking for an answer to past lives, and why we come here, and what happened with relationships, and how we connect with people, and did we have bonds with people from other lifetimes, which even in those other videos that I did about this whole twin flame thing, I've asserted, yeah, it's not, I've never said that I don't believe that we come back together with people from other lives. As a matter of fact, my current partner, I walk up to him and I said, I know you from another life, and I explained what I remembered, and we bonded immediately. But in this particular case, everything was it was a lot of pain, and it was a lot, and it was unnecessary. And had I known now what I know from Tibetan cosmology and astrology, I could have immediately looked at this and said it was a disaster right from the animals, from the incompatibility of our animals. It was a total disaster. It never would have worked. And with that in mind, what I'm about to do, what I'm about to share with you, now I can't show you how I calculated any of this, and I can't show you the process because it is guarded by Tibetan Bon lineage protectors and spirits, and if people try to do this, then they aren't empowered by a master, really bad stuff can happen to them. And all of us who are taking class and learning from His Holiness Padma-Gampa Rinpoche, who are students, he's made us all promise that we don't share this stuff, because people could get hurt from this. I mean, the spirit world is real, and nasty stuff can happen from it. But I can share you an example of this whole idea. It was actually his idea that he said, people want their twin flame, they want to find their soulmate. Well, you could calculate that for them. We could actually go forward and find the best possible combination within years too, so you could look within the certain year frame to see who would be a best match. What I've chosen to do here now, when I first started with the astrology, with my astrology class, my Tibetan Bon Astrology class, I started practicing on celebrities. And I told you guys in another video that I was going to do a video on Elvis Presley, because he was actually the first one I did, and I thought he was fascinating. I learned so much from his astrology. Let me just say that I am not going to go into his whole chart. I would like to do that in other videos. I would just like to look at his relationship with Priscilla, and and his relationship with another famous person who many of you know, Cassandra Peters. She told a story about when she met him when she was very young, and I thought that she would be a good, she added a nice mix to this in terms of the soulmate and how, you know, how one could meet their soulmate or feel like they'd met a soulmate. But I wanted to look at Elvis and Priscilla, and I wanted to share something that I learned from combining these things. Now I will say that there was a lot more going on with Elvis than he realized in his life, and that the reason that he came here was not just to be a celebrity. And had he known some things, I think that he could have had a profoundly different life than what he had. And I think that whenever someone reaches the kind of success that he had and is snuffed out so early, I think it's tragic, especially when you see what was in his chart and what he could have become. He was here for a lot more than just to be a hunk of burning love, which, by the way, is very interesting because his elemental energy shows a very strong combination of fire and earth. And he was known for his sex appeal and for being a hunk of burning love, which was one of his most famous songs. But what I did was I looked at his chart, and I looked at Priscilla's chart. And the way that we look at it is there are 4 different aspects of the animals in a person's chart, and what we call the magic squares. One of them is their general tendencies, one of them is how people view them, one of them is how they view themselves, and one of them is their deep, deep, deep self. It's the secret self that no one else really knows. And what we look at for this particular possibility, and this is something that I can actually do for other people if you guys are interested in having this done, is I can see what's going on in the deepest part of an individual and see compatibility-wise if that person is their twin flame and or soulmate or not. And in this case, from what I can see, what would be the best match for that, he and Priscilla were not. There were some really good things going on between the two of them, and I have to say that Priscilla had one of the most interesting and most positive charts that I've seen. And she had some great numbers in her luck and her success, and she's quite a woman. She's pretty cool, I think. He had some very interesting stuff going on, but what's going on here now, and I wrote it out on my laptop here. So here's the deal. In looking at both of them, we find out which numbers would work best. And let me say that first, the compatibility that worked best between the two of them was in how people viewed him and how people viewed her. Okay, so now I've seen this with many of my clients, that sometimes the part that draws people together has to do with how other people view them, or has to do with how they view themselves, or has to do with just general compatibility. And in this case, the part that was really compatible was how other people viewed them. And if you looked at it, I mean, it looked to everyone like this fairy tale romance. But what I do know is that their general tendencies, their general compatibility was not so great. She was a bird and he was a dog, and that is not, I will tell you from experience, that is not a good match at all. Here's the thing. She, in her chart and in her elements, what she needed was wind and wood, and he had that. He had some wind. He had a good bit of wind and wood in his general elemental makeup, but he had no metal, and that was what caused one of the problems in his life. And when I looked at his charts, and when I looked at what he had, a lot of fire, he had a lot of earth, he had no metal, and the metal would have given him the ability to say no, or the ability to set boundaries. And I believe what happened is that Priscilla provided that for him, and she has metal in her chart. Okay, so what I look at then in their magic square is in their deep inner self, the combination that they had was that they would sort of ignite each other's success. So I think you have to draw, when you start doing this, you have to start to ask some questions here about what exactly does a person mean by twin flame and or soulmate. Now, there are some very specific things that I know how to look for in terms of when I'm speaking to an individual and I see what they're trying to connect. I can tell what's gonna form the basis of the soulmate piece. Okay, in their case, their combination of magic squares created in the deepest part of themselves was that they had to remember the importance of being in touch with their emotions. That's what the combination created, and the ability to ignite each other's success. Okay? Now that's not bad, and they did propel each other towards success. However, if you're looking for something that's a lot more romantic, a lot more profound in a connection, that may not be the best connection. Now, I'm going to say, too, that each individual in this case would have two magic squares that I could look at, in which case I could see for an individual their best compatibility, their best twin flame, or their best soulmate, and then their second best, okay, the next best. I only looked at the first one, but there's another possibility as well. But I have so much other work and so many things that I'm doing for other clients that I just thought I would take a little time to put this out there so people could see this and realize that there's a better way than just suffering through it and beating yourself against a brick wall and being involved in a relationship that causes pain. What I'm looking here for is I'm looking at something that may cause harmony or something like that. The best match for him would be what he's got going on in that secret part of himself would be what we call a seven magic square, which would create an ideal and confident partnerships in which both appreciate beauty. Okay, so nowhere in Priscilla's chart was that magic square. Okay, so she has a whole bunch of magic squares that wasn't in there anywhere, but what we're looking at it for the ideal is that we get it in that part, which is the deep self, where that's the deepest self and those two people connect in that level. Okay, so now what happened is that I can take her magic squares and his magic squares, I can combine them and make a whole new magic square, and then what I create is something that we call dominion, which shows what goes on in their world. Okay, so when I take the deepest part of him and the deepest part of her, now I'm not talking about her general tendencies and his general tendencies, that would be another combination. I'm not talking about how people viewed them, and that would be another combination. And I'm not talking about how they viewed themselves. I'm talking about the deep secret self, that sometimes it's our secret world that we don't even know what's going on. It like sort of emerges right before we fall asleep when we're in our dreams, or the reactions that come from us and we don't know where they come. They're the deepest part of ourselves. When I combine those two, the result was very interesting. In both cases, they force a great deal of change on each other. So the combination creates an instability, and the deepest selves forced each other's to change, and there was no way around it. No matter what happened, it would continue to force each other to change. So for those of you who want stability in your relationships and want relationships to be stable and secure, this is not the combination to make that. This can create a great deal of instability and force constant change. And there was probably, when they were together, that deepest part of them was restless and wanted constant change. And when I look at what we call the dominion, I'm going to look at it from his point right now. Everything, because it's different for a male and a female. So what his world looks like and what her world looked like were very different. But in his case, in both cases, there's a great deal of change. There are some things that overlap, okay, in their worlds, and that is their ancestors and their children. Now, for those of you who don't know, they had one child, Lisa Marie. Okay, so children would include their legacy and their children. And in terms of their ancestors and their children, what we look at that coincide with both of them, in both cases, when it had their ancestors and parents, there was an interaction between them in which they forced their parents and they forced their children to change. So that deepest part of them forced change on their parents and their children. So everything they touched in their world, they changed. Okay? In relation to the parents, there was a great deal of vitality, practicality, optimism, innovation, and inspiration from the ancestors and parents. And on the negative side, there was bold recklessness from the ancestors and parents and forthrightness to the point of giving offense. So it could be that their ancestors were very blunt with them, and also that their parents and ancestors, in relation to that deepest part of them, were very sensitive and wounded, and very, very easily wounded and very sensitive. In terms of their children, their legacy and their children, the children were creative and passionate, outwardly shrewd, self-assured, and stylish and resourceful. And any of you who've ever seen Lisa Marie or seen Lisa Marie perform, she certainly fits that bill. She is quite a stylish, passionate, and outwardly shrewd, if you've ever heard her talk, individual. However, on the negative side, she's inconsistent, easily swayed by temptation and pleasure seeking, and as I understand it, she did have a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol. So the deepest part of themselves gave birth to this in their children. Okay? Which means that the instability and the constant change that was going on gave birth to this in their children and the other in their ancestors. Okay? So in terms of, that was what they shared. But then this what we call dominion, it changes depending upon a man or a woman, but those two pieces overlap. So let me tell you, so in terms of him, there was a strong sense of duty and responsibility in that deeper part of him. It was gentle and quiet and a provider of emotional stability. However, there's something else I'm going to add to this. That description, a strong sense of duty and responsibility in the deeper part of him that was gentle and quiet and a provider of emotional stability. There's a story that I've actually heard Cassandra Peters talk about, and for those of you who don't know, that's Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. She talks about a time when she was very young and she was working in Las Vegas and she met Elvis, and the individual that she's described very much sounds like that individual, which makes me think that she got to see the deeper part of him. But I'm going to add her to the mix after I go through Priscilla, and we're going to see if Elvira was a soulmate and or twin flame of his. So it's very interesting what came out. On the negative side, he was a shy dreamer who was better at having ideas than realizing him, at least in this part of his chart, at least in the deeper part of himself. And he wanted to go unnoticed, and he was idealistic to the point of self-effacement, which meant he sort of, didn't want to be noticed in this part of himself. Now, which is funny, because I heard another story from Sybil Shepherd talk about when she was on a date with him, and she was in a movie theater, and she was in the movie theater, and it was dark, and she waited for him, and he came in and sat with her in the dark, and no one saw him come in. So he didn't want to be noticed. He came in. He wanted to connect with her, and it was a private thing, which this also kind of confirms that deeper part of him was like that. Okay. In the human realm with Priscilla, he was filled with volcanic fire, which means that he was a sex symbol and volcanic fire, which certainly came out in the way people saw him. His dancing was considered obscene. He was only filmed from here up when he was on TV when he first came out, because they thought it was obscene. So he was a sex symbol, and in the home, though, there was discipline, containment, adaptability, and grace in a crisis, but also intuition and entrepreneurial ability and ability to realize their goals in the home. On the other side, he worried and kept his deeper feelings hidden, and he self-sabotaged himself. Okay, now that's him in the home. When that flips for Priscilla. Now what that means is in the home, there was a great deal of passion, there was a great deal of sex appeal, there was a great deal of volcanic fire. In public, however, she was disciplined, she was reserved, she was cool in a crisis. Okay, so it's interesting how that came out, and if you ever saw pictures of them or anything that I ever saw, and I didn't follow them a lot, but what I did see, what I have seen of them, she did look very, very disciplined, very proper, and he was the one who was the sex symbol in public. From the past, this is what we look at in terms of their dominion. We look at something called the cemetery area of their life. Would be the past, those who had died, those who had gone before. There were traditional values that came from the past, as well as talent and a competitive spirit, and extreme stubbornness and social isolation from thinking one knew it all. So that energy would have been fed to him from the spirit, from the dead. Let's say from the dead, and from the past, from his past, and from the dead. And so, in other words, the stuff from his past made him vacillate between hiding his feelings and worry to flipping to overconfidence. Okay? In her case, that same sense of stability, traditional values came from the past, came from what we call the deities box, which means that the religion and everything that came from her religion and the gods on her side of things was that tradition, that talent, competitive spirit, and extreme stubbornness and social isolation. So it sounds like a very traditional religion, okay? Sort of church and religion, okay? And in a lot of ways, very, very stubborn, okay? So as the deepest part of them came together, these are the parts that emerged in their world and how they interacted. So on his side, the gods worked to inspire and give him creativity, and they'd make deals for him to get what he wants. So you've heard me talk about contracts in other videos. This combination is one that would show he would constantly be changing, he would have to keep changing, and the gods would force him to keep changing to get what he wanted. And in this case, the deals that they were make were, money, houses, cars, things, celebrity, creativity, all those things that, that would result in pleasure seeking as well. And there was drug stuff going on there, so there may have been stuff and contracts that the gods were trying to make there. Now, by the way, whenever we look at this, we look at it all as, and you've heard me say this in other videos, it is sort of the playground of purification. All this stuff that's happening in our life is trying to purify us to wake us up to what we really are. Now, in the bigger sense, if I were to look at the bigger picture, I'd say, okay, well, this stuff was all happening in his life and in his relationship because we're trying to purify him, to wake him up to be what he was really, truly trying to be in his life, which is not necessarily what he was, okay? That's a whole other video entirely because that gets really involved. But in his case, then what happened was the spirit world, and in her case the environment, the spirits created more instability in his life when these two were together and in the deepest part of him, and tried to encourage a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility, a sense of humility. And in her case, it was the environment that was trying to change her to develop those qualities, okay? And in her case, even to this day, she's, and this particular one is also in her birth conditions. It was in her birth chart. She's done quite a bit of philanthropy and business and stuff like that. So the environment was trying to get her to be responsible and dutiful and compassionate and nurturing, and she has done a lot of that in her life. When he was with her, that deeper part of himself, the spirit world, was trying to get him to do that. But in some cases, also, it could have been cursing him to indulge in drugs. In his case, it was the spirit world. In her case, it was what we call the field or the environment. Okay, so she was trying to use that to create a positive legacy, I believe. And in his case, I believe the spirit world overcame him and created addictions and I think enemies. Okay, but I don't want to go into that too deeply. Then in his case in the environment, there was sociability, a need for, in the positive sense, practical go-getting, problem solvers in his environment, vitality, optimism, innovation, excitement, challenges, all this stuff he was constantly coming in. And then on the negative side, sensitivity, recklessness, and individuals who were easily wounded. Okay, now if you start to think how all of this as a big soup would make up a person's world, we can even go deeper than that. We can show how that environment of individuals who were easily wounded, who were social, who were reckless, who were inspirational, who were exciting, that actually consumes their legacy and their daughter as well. So that stuff in the environment had a profound effect on their daughter and actually drained her. And in another sense, the passionate sex appeal, all of that stuff of that he experienced in the public, that drained what we call the deities box, which means that the religion that he was raised in was consumed in the need to be expressive and sex appeal, and so the public image took over and wiped out what was coming from the God's realm or the religion or anything that was an ideal of his, which means that the ideals that he may have started with, in which he wanted to sort of be creative and help people, got consumed in this being this public sex appeal, this sex idol. And we could break all of this down even deeper from there. Okay, so we can go on and on and on with this, and I can look at this from a multitude of different angles, but that gives you a little taste of the fact of what their combination creates in their life. In the case of their daughter, their deeper selves, there was no way for her to win. And I'm putting that out there because I want people to think. I see this a lot of time in people's charts. They get involved in relationships, and what happens to their legacy and what happens to their children, they get consumed by what's going on with them. And it's something to consider in terms of compatibility and why compatibility is really important. Now, did this create change in them? Yes. Did it change them for the better? Absolutely. Did it change them for the worse? I'm sure it did. There was no way for the deeper parts of them to go without changing. Everything they touched, every moment of the day, and every time they came together, created change and forced change in each other. The particular element at work here is what we call black, and black is change, and nothing can resist it. What I do find interesting, though, is that he was missing metal, she had the metal, and she needed wood, and he had the wood in his general stuff. Now, what I looked at then, what I thought, well, this was kind of interesting, and I mean, I might even, if you want some specific questions about this, I can probably look into it a little deeper and tell you a little more about that. But there was one thing that I thought was really cool. Was I thought about that time that I'd heard Cassandra Peters, or Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, talk about meeting Elvis, and she seemed to say he was so gentle, and she seemed to really be affected by it. And I thought, well, I wonder if she had that 7 that would have been the ideal match for him. Okay, now she had it in the deeper part of herself, and he had it in the deep. They would have been, boom, it would have been soulmate, twin flame kind of thing, right? So I did hers, and what I discovered was interesting. She did have it. She had it in several places. She has the ideal match for him in her general tendencies, and she had the ideal match for him in how people viewed her. But she did not have it in the deepest part of herself that would have really hit the. So generally speaking, I would say the deepest part of him connected with her in a general way that left her profoundly moved, which it seems to be the case when you hear her talk about it. And it also affects how people view her, because she tells the story now. So it affects how people view her and her public face. As it was in the deepest part of her, something inside of him fed a part of her and created, did I write it out? And created the combination between them. I have it here on another sheet. Because you can't see it, but they're all everything I did is all laid out here in front of me like this. He brought the gentle creativity out in her, and she, from her point, you will be ideal sounding boards and confidants for each other. And as she tells the story, that's exactly what happened. They kind of talked to each other. They spent all night talking, and I think she had some ideas, and he was there, and she bounced those ideas off of him, and it made a profound effect on her. So there was a really profound connection, and what he gave her, the energy the elemental energy that was in was going on there, gave her something that she really needed. But was it that other connection? No, but that does show up. That connection between them shows up in the deepest, in her general tendencies and in how people view her. And now, like I said, it's a story that she tells, and so people can, make their conclusions from it. And I think generally it changed her life, and it gave her something that she really needed. And I love that it brought out the gentle creativity in the partner, and then from what it sounded like, he was very gentle and very, and she really brought out the gentleness, the gentle side of him. Was it the perfect match? No, but she did have that in there, and she got to glimpse some of it. So this I find very fascinating, because it shows that there are ways in terms of compatibility, there are ways in terms of Tibetan Bon Cosmology and Tibetan astrology, this is specifically Tibetan astrology, to see how the numbers could line up and see what that ideal match would be. At the same time, we could then look at how the animals match and whether or not they're compatible. We could even figure out what age range would be good. And this is now going back to that story I told in the beginning about that relationship that I was in. According to Western astrology, that was a good match for me and the individual, and it was a horror. And of all the years that I was working, I was trying to get Western astrology to tell me compatibility. It was really bad. When I started working with Tibetan astrology and cosmology and seeing the connections, it's really, really profound. I see some habits that aren't too great. Like, for example, Elvis was a dog, and Priscilla was a bird. Well, dogs eat birds. They're not really compatible, and I think in some sense he probably ate her up. She had some deeper parts of her that were very interesting. She's got 2 snakes in there, but the part of her, I think, where they connected, I think there was a great passion. However, it could not sustain itself, and the elemental combination that was in the deeper part of themselves, it was likely to burn itself out, and it is not a good elemental combination. When 2 of the same element of this particular element come together, it creates problems, and it can be very uncomfortable. So I think there was great passion, a great connection. I think they changed each other tremendously, but it explains why in the long run they split. They split because people, I think, still ask, well, why did they ever split? The image that they had together is where there was really compatible, which is why I think people were like, well, why they seem so perfect together? Well, yeah, because how people viewed him and how people viewed her matched, And when people saw those two together, they thought, oh, well, it goes good. Which is probably, and you've all have seen this, you probably have friends who were a couple and you thought, oh, they were so perfect together, and then they break up and they're like, no, you don't understand. It looked good in public, but when we were at home, it was different. And probably some of you probably have this experience. Everyone thought you were perfect, but behind the scenes, in the deepest part of you, there was no connecting, and it's horrible. So that's why this is important. But it is a much better way to go about things than, I think, just you're supposed to suffer, you're supposed to be with this twin flame, and it's supposed to teach you things. Well, yes, there was, in the case of a perfect match with Elvis, it would have been, they would teach each other greater confidence and to appreciate beauty. Isn't that a better thing than you're supposed to bounce off each other and call phone line psychics saying, when's my twin flame going to come back, and be miserable? There is a way to do it that is much better and much more accurate, and it is a science more than it is, I'm going to toss a couple cards. Now, don't get me wrong, you guys know how I love the tarot, and the tarot changed my life, and I still use the tarot for many things, but I will tell you, as much as I do love the tarot, it does not give you this kind of compatibility, nor does it tell you the kind of legacy it's going to leave, and nor does it tell you what the whole world is going to, not this way, not the way this does. So that's my little presentation on Priscilla and Elvis and Cassandra Peters, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Now, to be honest, I wanted to do Sybil Shepherd too, because I have a feeling that they might have been a good match. But I'm so swamped with clients and other projects right now, and charts that I've got to get done for people, that it takes, like I said, I do all this this is all done by hand. This is all done by hand. So I did Priscilla, I did Elvis months and months and months ago when I first started learning, a year ago now, when I first started learning Tibetan, almost a year ago when I started learning Tibetan astrology. I did have to do Cassandra Peters' numbers. And hey, Elvira, if you want to know, I can finish this for you if you want to know the rest. But that's it. That's my presentation on Elvis, Priscilla, and a little bit of a look into Elvira, Cassandra Peters. I hope you found this interesting. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. Hey, if you want me to do your compatibility like this, or find out who would be the perfect match for you, compatibility wise, or if you have someone that you're looking at and you want me to do compatibility on it, or if you want to see who your twin flame could be and what the potential could be, contact me and we'll set something up. Okay, if you want to get your chart done, contact me as well. I'll do your birth chart, because the birth condition, I mean, this now everything I said is really fascinating, but what I really found fascinating was when I did Elvis's stuff, and I was like, wow, there was so much more going on with him. And then when I realized that he was missing metal, how that could have helped him in his life, and then I said, I knew it. I was like, Priscilla must have had the metal. She had the metal. Oh, and by the way, I didn't say this. Cassandra Peters has a ton of metal in her. Elvira's got 1, 2, 3, 4 metals. She got 4 metals. She's got mostly metal, and that was exactly what he was lacking. And he had a lot of fire and a lot of earth, and that supported her. So the metal that she had fed his fire, and the earth that he had supported her metal. And it was another reason why it was kind of cool. It was cool to see that. And when I did it, I'm like, I just know from what I see of her public face and her character that's a metal. That says someone who's got a lot of metal in there, and sure enough, she does. So hey, if you want to learn any of this, you want to get your chart done, your birth chart done, I got a long waiting list. It's months now, but it's worth it. And once you pay, you're on the waiting list. And I'm getting faster and faster and faster as I do these. So contact me for either or 779-302-8009, or if you got like a question that you need some immediate response with. Now I can do the compatibility stuff pretty pretty fast. So some of the stuff I did, like this one I show you today, I can do that fast. So if you want to just do the compatibility piece, I could do that for you guys. If you want if you want to do a crystal mirror, if you got something you want to look at, crystal mirrors where I make a portal, we look at the portal, I look at what the magic squares are involved in the portal. I can actually use Tibetan Bon processes to push energy into the portal to cause changes or provide support or whatever it is you need. If you want any of this, or you want to learn how to read the tarot, because I'm still doing tarot classes on how to read the crystal ball, classes on how to read playing cards, classes on how to read Mexican Loteria or Lenormand. Or if you just want, or you want me to do a card reading for you, I can do any of these things, or scrying for you, whatever. Contact me, 779-302-8009, or you can email me at conjurehope@gmail.com. You guys have a fantastic week, and I hope you enjoyed this. Hey, any questions you got, put them in the thing below. I'll do my best to answer about any of this, and I will be doing more videos like this. I've been trying to get the time to do it, and today it just seemed like the right time to do this. So have a fantastic week, and as always, I'm wishing you success and good fortune in all